The first thing Eleanor Vale heard, when she stepped through the gates of Blackwood Hall, was a string quartet playing a love song she had once danced to barefoot in a kitchen with a boy who had promised to marry her. The second thing she heard was someone screaming. Not loudly, not yet. It was the strangled, breathless sound of a woman who had seen a ghost. Eleanor stopped beneath the stone archway, one hand resting protectively over the slight curve of her stomach. She had imagined this moment 100 different ways during the 6 years she had been away. In some versions, Daniel would run to her. In others, he would slap her. Sometimes she imagined him staring at her with tears in his eyes. Sometimes she imagined him not recognizing her at all. She had never imagined this. She had never imagined walking into the engagement party of the man she had once loved and discovering that the woman greeting the guests at the top of the marble steps was wearing the face Eleanor had spent years believing belonged to someone else. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the strap of her handbag. The woman smiled. "Miss Vale." Eleanor looked up. The woman was elegant, silver-haired, and dressed in midnight blue silk. She was exactly as Eleanor remembered her. Daniel's mother, Margaret Blackwood. Except Margaret Blackwood had supposedly been dead for 3 years. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. "No," she whispered. The woman descended one step. "You must have the wrong house." Eleanor stared at her. Behind Margaret, through the open doors of Blackwood Hall, hundreds of warm lights glittered against polished floors. Champagne flowed. Guests laughed. Photographers moved between tables. At the center of it all stood Daniel. Daniel, older, broader, more sharply dressed, but unmistakably Daniel. The boy who had once climbed through her bedroom window because he had lost his house key. The boy who had carved their initials into the old oak tree behind the village church. The boy who had kissed her for the first time beside the river and then spent 10 minutes apologizing because he'd bumped her nose. The man who had been told she was dead. His eyes found hers. The champagne glass in his hand slipped. It shattered on the floor. Conversation died around him. Daniel Blackwood stared at Eleanor as though the entire world had just tilted beneath his feet. "Eleanor." She could barely breathe. "Hello, Daniel." Someone behind him whispered, "Who is she?" Daniel didn't answer. He walked toward her. One step, then another. His face had gone completely white. "Eleanor." This time her name broke out of him like a prayer. She swallowed. "I think we need to talk." Daniel stopped less than a meter away. For a moment neither moved. Then his hand rose slowly, almost involuntarily, and touched her cheek. His fingers trembled. "You're alive." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Apparently." He stared at her stomach. The silence that followed was so complete she could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the entrance hall. Daniel's expression changed. Not anger, not confusion. Something far more frightening. Recognition. "Is that my child?" Eleanor opened her eyes. "Yes." A glass dropped somewhere behind them. Then Margaret Blackwood spoke. "Daniel." He didn't look away from Eleanor. Margaret's voice hardened. "Daniel, come inside." He ignored her. "How long?" Eleanor's throat tightened. 23 weeks. He looked at her as though she had struck him. 23 weeks? "I didn't know how to find you." "You didn't know?" "You were told I was dead." "I was told you died 6 years ago." "I know." "Who told you?" Eleanor looked toward Margaret. The older woman's expression had become unreadable. Daniel followed her gaze. "Mother." Margaret's lips parted. Before she could answer, another voice came from the doorway. "Daniel." A woman stepped forward. Beautiful, blonde, perfectly composed. She wore a pale gold dress and a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Eleanor's entire house. Charlotte Ashford, Daniel's fiancée. She looked at Eleanor, then at Daniel, then down at Eleanor's stomach. Her smile disappeared. "Who is she?" Daniel finally turned. "Charlotte." She waited. He couldn't seem to find the words. Eleanor almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Charlotte looked at her again. "Who is she?" Eleanor lifted her chin. I'm Eleanor Vale. Charlotte's face changed. It was tiny, almost invisible. But Eleanor saw it. Recognition. Charlotte knew the name. Daniel noticed too. You know her? Charlotte blinked. No. You hesitated. I was surprised. Daniel looked between them. Why? Charlotte's eyes hardened. Because everyone knows the story. What story? Charlotte gave Eleanor a thin smile. The dead girl. The room seemed to freeze. Eleanor felt something inside her break. Daniel's expression became murderous. Don't. Charlotte looked at him. Daniel. She disappeared 6 years ago. I didn't say she disappeared. She was declared dead. I know. And now she appears at our engagement party claiming to be your first love and carrying your child? I didn't claim anything. Eleanor's voice was quiet. I told him the truth. Charlotte looked at her. How convenient. Daniel stepped between them. Enough. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. For a moment Eleanor wondered if she had misjudged her. Then Charlotte whispered, You promised me. Daniel stared at her. I promised to marry you. No. Charlotte shook her head. You promised that she was gone. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Daniel's face changed. What did you just say? Charlotte looked horrified by her own words. I meant. What did you mean? I meant everyone believed she was gone. Daniel stared at her. Eleanor watched the realization begin to form in his eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And before anyone could speak again, Margaret Blackwood turned toward the crowd. Everyone should leave. A murmur passed through the room. What? The party is over. Margaret. I said leave. People began moving. But Daniel didn't. Neither did Eleanor. Neither did Charlotte. And neither did the woman who had been standing quietly beside the fireplace for the last 5 minutes. A woman Eleanor had never seen before. She was around Daniel's age, perhaps a year younger, dark-haired, elegant, calm. She wore no jewelry except a thin gold chain around her neck. She had been watching Eleanor with an expression that was almost impossible to read. When Eleanor looked at her, the woman smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, almost sadly. Then she whispered something only Eleanor could hear. You really should have stayed dead. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. The woman walked away. Daniel noticed. Who was that? Margaret answered too quickly. Nobody. Eleanor stared after the woman. She isn't nobody. Margaret's expression tightened. Go home, Eleanor. Daniel stepped forward. Mother. What the hell is happening? Margaret looked at him. And for the first time, Eleanor saw fear in her eyes. Everything you think you know about this family, Margaret whispered, is about to change. Then the lights went out. Someone screamed. There was a crash. A man shouted that the doors were locked. And in the darkness, Eleanor felt a hand close around her wrist. She tried to pull away. Daniel. No answer. The grip tightened. Then a voice whispered beside her ear. Don't trust him. Eleanor froze. The lights came back. The hand was gone. Daniel was standing several meters away. Charlotte was beside him. Margaret had collapsed into a chair. And the dark-haired woman was nowhere to be seen. For the next 20 minutes, Blackwood Hall descended into chaos. Guests left through the main entrance, whispering behind gloved hands and designer handbags. Security searched the grounds. Daniel ordered the gates opened. Margaret was taken upstairs by 2 servants. Charlotte disappeared into a side room. Eleanor stood alone beside the ruined champagne table, one hand over her stomach. She should have left. Every sensible instinct she possessed told her to leave. But she had spent 6 years believing Daniel was dead to her. 6 years believing he had chosen another woman. 6 years raising the possibility of his child inside her body without knowing whether he would ever know. She wasn't leaving now. Daniel found her in the library. He closed the door behind him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he said, I don't know where to begin. Begin with the truth. I don't know the truth. Then tell me what you know. He nodded. When I was 17, you disappeared. I was 17 too. I know. My father came to the village. I remember. He told me you'd been killed in an accident. Eleanor stared at him. What accident? I don't know. Where? Near the coast. I wasn't near the coast. I know that now. She crossed her arms. How long did you believe I was dead? Years. And you never investigated? His jaw tightened. I was 16. 17. I was 17. You were rich. I was a prisoner in my own house. She looked away. He stepped closer. My father controlled everything. My education, my friends, my money, my future. You still could have looked for me. I did. She turned. What? I looked for you. When? After I turned 21. I hired someone. Why didn't they find me? Because the records had been altered. Eleanor stared at him. What records? Your school records. Medical records. Your family address. She felt dizzy. My parents moved. I know. They changed their number. I know. How? Because I spent years trying to find you. Her eyes filled. Then why did you marry Charlotte? I didn't. You were engaged. Tonight was supposed to be the engagement announcement. She looked at him. Supposed to be? I never agreed to marry her. You were wearing an engagement ring. Daniel looked down at his hand. There was no ring. Eleanor frowned. It was on your finger. I took it off when I saw you. She laughed once, bitterly. So this is how it works? What? You disappear for 6 years, return with a wealthy fiancé, and expect me to believe you were secretly searching for me? I don't expect anything. Good. I only want the truth. So do I. A knock sounded. Neither moved. Then Margaret's voice came through the door. Daniel. He opened it. Margaret stood there looking exhausted. She held an old wooden box. I think, she said quietly, it's time. She walked into the library. Eleanor stared at the box. What's that? My mother's. Daniel frowned. Grandmother's. Margaret nodded. She gave it to me the night before she died. She placed it on the desk. I was told never to open it unless the girl returned. Eleanor's stomach tightened. The girl. Margaret looked directly at her. You. Daniel stepped forward. Mother. What are you talking about? Margaret opened the box. Inside was a faded photograph. Eleanor picked it up. It showed 2 young women standing beside the same oak tree Eleanor and Daniel had carved their initials into years earlier. One woman was Margaret. The other was unfamiliar, but she had Eleanor's eyes. Who is she? Margaret whispered. My sister. Daniel stared. You never had a sister. Margaret looked at him. That's what you were told. Eleanor turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 6 words. She must never know who she is. Daniel looked at his mother. Who? Margaret's hands began to shake. Your sister. The library door slammed shut. Everyone turned. The dark-haired woman from the party stood there. She had changed clothes. Her face was pale. Her eyes were fixed on Margaret. You weren't supposed to tell them. Margaret stood. Vivian. Daniel frowned. Who is Vivian? The woman smiled sadly. Your sister. Daniel went completely still. No. Vivian looked at him. Hello, Daniel. He stared at her. Then at Margaret. Then back at Vivian. You've known her. Margaret began to cry. For 26 years. Daniel stepped backward. No. Vivian walked into the room. I've been in your life longer than you know. You work for my family. I was raised by your family. Who are you? Vivian looked at Eleanor. Then back at Daniel. I'm the reason Eleanor was sent away. Daniel's face hardened. Why? Vivian swallowed. Because I was afraid you'd choose her. Eleanor felt the room tilt. Choose me for what? Vivian laughed softly. You still don't understand. She walked toward the window. Your father wasn't the one running this family. Daniel stared. Mother. Margaret shook her head. Vivian turned. No. She pointed at herself. I was. Daniel stared at her. You were 16. Not when it mattered. She took a breath. Your father had another child before you. Daniel's eyes narrowed. With whom? Our father had an affair with my mother. Margaret closed her eyes. Vivian continued. Your father wanted to take me away from her. Margaret agreed. She raised me as a distant family friend because the scandal would have destroyed the company. Daniel shook his head. You aren't my sister. I have the same father. That doesn't make you my sister. It makes me your half-sister. Eleanor watched him struggle to process it. Vivian's voice softened. And when our father died, he left control of the family trust to both of us. Daniel stared. What? Not to you alone. Vivian reached into her handbag. She removed a folded document. Your father knew what I was capable of. He knew I had been running parts of the company for years. Daniel took the document. His hands trembled as he read. Eleanor watched his face. What does it say? He looked at her. She controls 40% of the trust. Vivian smiled. And your mother controls another 20. Daniel looked at Margaret. You knew? Yes. For how long? Since the day you were born. He looked devastated. You lied to me, Margaret whispered. I was trying to protect you. You lied about my sister. I was trying to protect both of you. Vivian laughed bitterly. Don't make yourself noble now. Margaret looked at her. I did what your mother asked. Vivian's expression changed. My mother. She begged me. She begged you to erase me? She begged me to give you a chance. Vivian's face hardened. And did you? Margaret said nothing. Daniel looked between them. What does any of this have to do with Eleanor? Vivian's expression became cold. Everything. She looked at Eleanor. Your father knew Eleanor existed. Daniel froze. My father? Yes. How? He had people watching you. Eleanor's heart began pounding. Vivian continued. He discovered you and Eleanor were together. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated her. No. Vivian looked at Eleanor. He feared her. Why? Because your mother had discovered what your father had done. Margaret whispered. Enough. Vivian ignored her. Your mother discovered that your father had been moving money through shell companies. She kept records. Eleanor remembered the phrase, his mother's last secret. She looked at the wooden box. The documents. Vivian nodded. Exactly. Daniel opened the box. Beneath the photograph were bank statements, handwritten notes, and copies of contracts. His face changed. This is evidence. Yes. Evidence of what? Fraud. Daniel looked at his mother. Did father steal from the company? Margaret shook her head. He stole from everyone. Eleanor looked at Vivian. And your mother? She found out. What happened to her? Vivian's face went blank. She died. How? Officially. Vivian smiled without humor. A heart attack. Daniel whispered. And unofficially? Vivian looked at him. She was poisoned. The room went silent. Margaret began to cry. Daniel sat down. Eleanor's hand went instinctively to her stomach. The pieces were beginning to connect. The dead girl, the missing records, the secret daughter, the stolen money, the woman controlling the family. But there was still one question. Why did you tell Daniel I was dead? Vivian looked at her. Because I knew he loved you. Daniel stood. That's not an answer. It is. No. He stepped toward Vivian. You destroyed 6 years of our lives. I know. You let me believe she was dead. I know. You let her believe I had chosen someone else. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I know. Why? Vivian finally broke. Because I couldn't lose you too. Daniel stared. You didn't lose me. I did. She wiped her eyes. When our father died, I thought you would become like him. Powerful, untouchable, surrounded by people who wanted your money. I was terrified that if you married Eleanor, she would become part of the family and eventually discover what I had been hiding. Eleanor frowned. What were you hiding? Vivian looked at Margaret. Margaret whispered, the final account. Vivian nodded. The account that proves your father ordered the poisoning. Daniel's face went white. Who? My mother. Eleanor stared. Your father killed your mother? Vivian nodded. And I found out. How? Because I was there. Daniel's eyes widened. You were a child. I was 9. Vivian. I saw him put something in her tea. Her voice cracked. I watched her drink it. The room was silent. I told Margaret. Margaret stepped forward. I believed her. Vivian looked at her. But your father threatened to kill Daniel if we went to the police. Daniel stared. Me? He knew you were the one thing Vivian loved. Vivian nodded. So we buried the truth. Eleanor looked at the papers. And Eleanor? Vivian looked ashamed. Your mother discovered the account too. Daniel's mother? Yes. She was going to expose him. But she never did. No. Why? Because she thought she could protect everyone by hiding the evidence. Eleanor looked at Margaret. And she gave it to you. Margaret nodded. She trusted me. Then why did you let me go? Margaret looked at Eleanor. Because your father threatened to kill you. Eleanor stopped breathing. My father? No. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Daniel's father. Daniel closed his eyes. The truth was becoming unbearable. Eleanor sat down. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were 17. I deserved to know. Yes. You took my life away. I know. You let me believe Daniel didn't love me. Margaret looked down. I know. Daniel came toward Eleanor. She stood before he reached her. Don't. He stopped. She was crying now. I need to understand something. What? Did you ever stop loving me? Daniel didn't hesitate. No. Even after 6 years? No. Even when you thought I was dead? He swallowed. Especially then. Eleanor looked away. I hated you. I know. I thought you had replaced me. I never replaced you. She looked at him. You should have found me. I know. You should have fought harder. I know. You should have. Her voice broke. He stepped closer. I know, she cried. And then, for the first time in 6 years, Daniel pulled her into his arms. She resisted for 3 seconds, then collapsed against him. He held her like something fragile. I thought you were dead, he whispered. I thought you didn't want me. I wanted you every day. She closed her eyes. I hate you. I know. I still love you. His arms tightened. I know. Behind them, Vivian quietly left the room. Neither noticed. For a few minutes, there was no family scandal. No fraud. No poisoned mother. No engagement party. Only 2 people who had lost 6 years trying to survive without each other. Then Eleanor pulled away. There is something else. Daniel looked at her. What? I didn't come here only because of the baby. His expression changed. Why did you come? She reached into her handbag. She took out a letter. I found this 3 weeks ago. Daniel took it. He recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother. Eleanor nodded. It was hidden inside an old book at my parents' house. Daniel unfolded it. His mother's words were brief. Daniel, if Eleanor has found this, then something has happened that I feared. Do not trust the person who claims to be protecting you. The truth is not in the family home. It is beneath the place where you first kissed her. Daniel looked up. The river. Eleanor nodded. The old boathouse. He stared at her. You knew. I found the letter. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. He looked hurt. I'm sorry. I was afraid. He nodded. I understand. They left Blackwood Hall together. Neither noticed the black car following them. The old boathouse had been abandoned for years. Daniel broke the lock. Inside, everything smelled of damp wood and river water. Eleanor remembered sitting on the floor there with Daniel when they were teenagers. He had once told her he wanted to buy the entire estate and turn it into a hotel. She had laughed and told him he couldn't even make toast. He had replied that she would cook. She had thrown a cushion at him. Now the room felt haunted. Daniel ran his hands along the wall. Where would she hide something? Somewhere sentimental. He looked at her. You're still better at this than me. You were always the rich idiot. Fair. She smiled despite herself. There's the floorboard. He knelt. One board was slightly raised. Together they lifted it. Beneath it was a metal box. Daniel stared. That's it. He opened it. Inside was a ledger, photographs, a small cassette tape, and one envelope. Daniel picked up the envelope. It had his name on it. He opened it. The letter inside was from his father. It was dated 27 years earlier. Daniel read silently. Then his face drained of color. What? He handed it to Eleanor. She read. Their father had written about Vivian, about the affair, about the money, about Eleanor. But the final paragraph made Eleanor's blood run cold. If Daniel ever discovers the truth, tell him that the danger is not Vivian. She is only trying to survive. The person you must fear is the woman who has spent 20 years pretending to be my wife. Eleanor looked up. Margaret. Daniel shook his head. No. The letter continued. She knows what happened to the first Margaret. Eleanor's mouth went dry. The first Margaret? Daniel stared at her. My mother. No. There were two. He shook his head. I don't understand. A floorboard creaked behind them. They turned. Margaret stood in the doorway. She was holding a gun. Daniel stared. Mother. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. Eleanor stepped backward. You aren't Margaret. The woman smiled sadly. No. Daniel's face collapsed. Who are you? She lowered the gun. My name is Helena. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Helena. The name appeared in the ledger. Helena Voss. Daniel's father's private secretary. The woman who had vanished 26 years earlier. The woman accused of helping him move money. The woman supposedly killed in a car accident. Daniel whispered, You killed my mother. Helena closed her eyes. No. You replaced her. She asked me to. What? Helena looked at Eleanor. Your mother was dying. Daniel stared. She had cancer. She didn't. Helena's voice broke. She had discovered the poisoning. Your father knew she would expose him. He wanted her dead. Then why did she disappear? Because she wanted you alive. Daniel's face twisted with confusion. She asked you to pretend to be her? Yes. Why? Because your father believed she was dead. Eleanor whispered. But if he believed she was dead, why did you stay? Helena looked toward the river. Because someone had to raise you. Daniel shook his head. You weren't my mother. No. But you acted like her. Every day. Why? Because the real Margaret couldn't. Daniel began crying. Eleanor had never seen him cry before. Helena continued. She died 3 years after you were born. Daniel covered his face. I was told she died 6 years ago. I know. Who told me? Your father. Why? Because he wanted you to believe she was alive. Daniel stared at her. That makes no sense. It does if you understand what he wanted. What? Your inheritance. Daniel went still. Helena looked at Eleanor. And your child. The door behind them slammed. Vivian appeared. Helena. Helena turned. Vivian looked terrified. Put the gun down. Helena's expression hardened. You've ruined everything. Vivian stepped forward. I was trying to protect him. You were trying to control him. I loved him. You lied to him. So did you. Daniel looked between them. Both of you. His voice shook. You both lied to me. Vivian lowered her eyes. Yes. Daniel laughed bitterly. Is there anyone in this family who hasn't? Eleanor reached for his hand. He took it. Helena looked at them, then at Eleanor's stomach. She must leave. Eleanor frowned. What? Helena's expression changed. You don't understand. Your father isn't the only person who wanted Daniel's inheritance. Vivian stared. Who? Helena whispered. Charlotte. The call ended. Eleanor stared at him. What did she say? Daniel looked at her. My father is alive. Nobody spoke. Then Vivian whispered, That's impossible. Helena shook her head. No. Daniel looked at her. You knew. I suspected. You suspected my father was alive? He disappeared after the poisoning. Vivian's face went white. You said he died. I said I didn't know. Daniel stepped backward. We have to go. They returned to Blackwood Hall. The house was dark. Every light had been turned off. Charlotte stood at the top of the stairs. She was crying. Daniel walked toward her. Where is he? Charlotte pointed toward the drawing room. He's waiting for you. Daniel entered. A man stood beside the fireplace. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. Richard Blackwood, Daniel's father. He smiled. Hello, son. Daniel stopped. You died. Richard laughed. Apparently, I'm difficult to kill. Eleanor stood behind Daniel. Richard's eyes moved toward her. He smiled. And there she is. Eleanor felt sick. You remember me. I remember everything. Richard looked at her stomach. Even that. Daniel stepped in front of her. You stay away from her. Richard laughed. You always were sentimental. You're under arrest. Richard smiled. For what? Fraud. Prove it. Poisoning. Richard's smile faded. Careful. Kidnapping. Prove it. Manipulating records. Again, prove it. Daniel held up the ledger. Richard stared at it. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Where did you find that? The boathouse. Richard looked at Helena. You. She nodded. You should have burned it. I couldn't. Why? Because I wanted Daniel to know. Richard took a step forward. You have no idea what you've done. Helena laughed. I spent 26 years pretending to be a dead woman. I think I know exactly what I've done. Charlotte suddenly spoke. Richard. Everyone turned. Charlotte stood at the doorway. Why did you tell me he was dead? Richard looked at her. What? You told me Daniel's father was dead. Richard frowned. Charlotte's voice trembled. You told me the family needed me. Daniel looked at her. What did you know? Nothing. Richard said. She knows everything. Charlotte looked at him. You promised me Daniel. Richard smiled. I promised you money. Daniel stared. Charlotte began crying. You used me. Of course. She looked at Daniel. I'm sorry. He didn't answer. Charlotte turned toward Richard. You told me if I married Daniel, you'd pay off my father's debts. Richard shrugged. And you agreed. You said Daniel would never find out about Eleanor. Richard's eyes narrowed. You were supposed to keep her away. I tried. Not hard enough. Charlotte's face hardened. You made me the villain. You made yourself the villain. Daniel stared at them. Then he looked at Eleanor. I am so sorry. She shook her head. This isn't your fault. Richard laughed. Touching. Daniel turned. You've lost. Richard smiled. No. He reached into his pocket. A click. A small remote. Eleanor looked at it. What is that? Richard smiled. The end of the Blackwood family. He pressed the button. The house shook. Glass shattered upstairs. Smoke filled the corridor. Daniel grabbed Eleanor. Run! They raced toward the entrance. Vivian pulled Helena behind her. Charlotte screamed. Another explosion rocked the house. The chandelier crashed. Eleanor stumbled. Daniel caught her. Are you hurt? No. Are you sure? Yes. Then move. They reached the gardens. Behind them, Blackwood Hall burned. Richard was nowhere to be seen. Daniel turned. My father. Vivian grabbed his arm. Leave him. He'll die. He killed our mother. Daniel looked at her. He's still my father. Vivian stared at him. Then nodded. Then go. Daniel ran back. Eleanor screamed his name. He disappeared into the smoke. Minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Eleanor stood barefoot in the wet grass because she had lost one shoe somewhere inside. Sirens approached. Fire engines flooded the estate. And then Daniel emerged. Blood ran down his forehead. He was carrying someone. Richard. Alive. Daniel collapsed beside the ambulance. Eleanor ran to him. "You idiot." He laughed weakly. "I've been called worse." She touched his face. "You're bleeding. So are you." She looked down. Her hand was scratched. "That's nothing." He smiled. "You're still bossy. You still deserve it." For the first time that night, they laughed. A week later, the Blackwood Empire was in ruins. Richard was arrested. The ledger led to charges that stretched back decades. The poisoning investigation was reopened. Charlotte cooperated with prosecutors. Vivian confessed to falsifying records. But she also turned over the evidence that saved Daniel from being charged with financial crimes he had never committed. Helena finally stopped pretending to be Margaret. She moved into a small cottage overlooking the sea. Daniel visited her every Sunday. First, he called her Helena. Then, slowly, he began calling her Mum. She cried the first time. So did he. Vivian left Blackwood Hall. She refused the family trust at first. Daniel insisted she take her legal share. "You spent 26 years protecting it," he told her. "That's not why I did it." "I know." "Then why?" "Because you're my sister." She smiled. "You're annoyingly sentimental." "I've been told." Months passed. Eleanor's pregnancy became impossible to hide. The old Blackwood scandal appeared in newspapers. People speculated. Rumors spread. But Daniel stopped caring. One rainy evening, Eleanor found him sitting beneath the oak tree beside the village church. Their initials were still there. 16-year-old Daniel had carved them crookedly. Eleanor sat beside him. "You know," she said, "you ruined that tree. I was 17. You were terrible with knives. I was romantic. You carved EV and DB inside a heart." "Exactly. That's not romantic." "It is when you're 17. She laughed. He looked at her. "Are you happy?" She thought about it. "Sometimes." "That's honest." "I'm scared." "So am I." She looked at him. "Of what?" "That I'll lose you again." "You won't." "You can't promise that." "No." She took his hand. "But I can promise I won't disappear." He squeezed her fingers. "I love you." She smiled. "I know. That's all I get?" "You've had 6 years to wait." He laughed. "I've waited longer." She leaned against his shoulder. After a moment she said, "Daniel?" "Yes. There's something I haven't told you." His face changed. "What?" She smiled. "The baby kicked." He stared. "When?" "This morning." "You didn't tell me?" "I wanted to see your face." He immediately placed his hand against her stomach. Nothing happened. He waited. Nothing. "Maybe the baby doesn't like you. Maybe the baby has taste." Rude. Then there was a tiny movement beneath his palm. Daniel froze. His eyes filled with tears. Eleanor watched him. "Hello," he whispered. Another kick. He laughed. A tear ran down his cheek. "I felt it." "I know. Our baby. Our baby." He looked at her. And something passed between them that was stronger than the years they had lost. Not a promise that nothing bad would ever happen again. Not a fantasy that love could erase everything. Something better. A decision. To stay. To tell the truth. To choose each other when choosing each other was difficult. He kissed her forehead. "Will you marry me?" Eleanor laughed. "You're asking now? I thought you'd say no." "You've been asking me since we were 17. I've been waiting for a yes." She looked at him. "Yes." He smiled. "Really?" "No." His face fell. She laughed. "Yes, Daniel." He pulled her into his arms. And somewhere in the distance, bells began ringing from the church. Neither of them noticed the woman standing across the road. Vivian. She watched them beneath the oak tree. Then she looked down at the old photograph in her hand. Two young girls, Margaret and Helena, and written on the back, in faded ink, were the words, "There is always one secret left." Vivian turned the photograph over. There was a second line written underneath. "Daniel has another brother." She looked toward Blackwood Hall, then toward Eleanor. Her expression changed. Not fear, not quite, something closer to dread. She pulled out her phone. A message appeared. "Are you going to tell him?" Vivian stared at it for several seconds, then typed, "Not yet." She put the phone away, but she did not walk toward the couple. Instead, she looked toward the road. A black car was parked beneath the trees. Inside sat a man Daniel had never met, a man who had been watching the house for 3 days. Vivian recognized him. Her face went pale. She whispered, "No." The car drove away. Vivian immediately called Daniel. He answered after the second ring. "What's wrong?" She looked at Eleanor. "Nothing." "Vivian, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If anyone comes asking about your family." She swallowed. "Don't believe them." Daniel frowned. "Why?" Vivian looked toward the disappearing car. "Because your father wasn't the only Blackwood who survived." The line went silent. Daniel looked at Eleanor. She saw the change in his expression. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I don't know." And for the first time since Eleanor had returned to his life, he didn't sound afraid of losing her. He sounded afraid of what might come next. Eleanor took his hand. Whatever the next secret was, they would face it together. This time, nobody would convince either of them that the other was dead. Nobody would separate them with a lie. Nobody would decide who they were allowed to love. Daniel looked down at her hand in his, then at the oak tree where their names had survived 6 years of rain, winter, and neglect. The heart around them was cracked. The letters were faded, but they were still there. So were they, and for now that was enough. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you found this story interesting, please consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you want to hear plenty more stories just like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more to unpack in future videos. See you soon.